Monitoring Kali Linux. Armand Shahriarian. Monitoring. Before we do any testing at all, we need to talk about the importance of monitoring. If you are doing any of the testing we are talking about for your company or a customer, ideally you aren't taking anything down deliberately unless you have been asked to. However, no matter how careful you are, there is always the possibility that something bad may happen and services or systems may get knocked over. This is why it's essential to communicate with the people who own the systems so they can keep an eye on their systems and services. Businesses are not going to want to impact their customers, so they will often want staff to be available to restart services or systems if that's necessary. Some companies may want to test their operations staff, meaning they expect you to do what you can to infiltrate and knock over systems and services, without doing any long-term or permanent damage. In this case, you wouldn't communicate with anyone but the management who hired you. In most cases, though, companies are going to want to make sure they keep their production environment operational. If the operations staff is involved, they will want to have some sort of monitoring in place. This could be watching logs, which is generally advisable. However, logs are not always reliable. After all, if you are able to crash a service, the service may not have long enough to write anything useful to the logs before failing. This does not mean, though, that you should discount logs. Keep in mind that the purpose of SECU RIDE testing is to help improve the security posture of the company you are working for. The logs may be essential to get hints as to what is happening with the process before it fails. Services may not fail in the sense that the process stops, but sometimes the service may not behave as expected. This is where logs can be important, to get a sense of what the application was trying to do. There may be a watchdog in place. Watchdogs are sometimes used to ensure that a process stays up. Should the process fail, the PID would no longer appear in the process table, and the watchdog would know to restart that process. This same sort of watchdog capability can be used to determine whether the process has failed. Even if you don't want the process restarted, just keeping an eye on the process table to see whether the process has failed will be an indicator if something has happened to the process. Runaway processes can start chewing up processor resources. As a result, looking at processor utilization and memory utilization is essential. This can be done using open source monitoring utilities. You can also use commercial software or, in the case of Windows or Mac OS, built-in operating system utilities for the monitoring. One popular monitoring program is Nagios. On one of my virtual systems, I have Nagios installed. In Figure 2:2, you can see the output of the monitoring of that host. Without any additional configuration, Nagios monitors the number of processes, processor utilization, and service state of both the SSH and HTTP servers. Figure 2:2. Monitoring resources. If you aren't getting the cooperation, for whatever reason, of the operations staff, and you don't have direct access to the systems under test, you may need to be able to track at least the service state remotely. When you are using some of the network test tools that we'll be talking about here, they may stop getting responses from the service being tested. This may or may not be a result of the service failing. It could be a problem with the monitoring, or it could be some security mechanism in place to shut down network abuses. Manually verifying the service to ensure it is down is important. Essential to reporting. When you are testing and you notice that a service has failed, make sure you have noted, to the best of your ability, where the failure occurred. Telling a customer or your employer that a service failed isn't very helpful because they won't know how to fix it. Keeping detailed notes will help you when you get to reporting, so you can tell them exactly what you were doing when the service failed if they need to be able to recreate it in order to resolve the problem. Manual testing can be done using a tool like Netcat or even the Telnet client. When you connect to a service port by using one of these tools, you will get an indication as to whether the service is responsive. Doing this manual verification, especially if it's done from a separate system to rule out being blocked or blacklisted, can help to rule out false positives. Ultimately, a lot of security testing can come down to ruling out false positives that result from the different tools that we use. Monitoring and validation are essential to make sure that what you are presenting to your employer or customer is valid as well as actionable. Remember, you are trying to help them improve their security posture, not just point out where things are